So this is going to be a review of the Nikon Nikkor 70-200 AF f4 constant. Now this lens was introduced in the mid-1980s. They only made it for about 2 years or so, and it came out with some of the very first high-performance autofocus cameras from Nikon. This was the very first autofocus telephoto lens, I believe. It uses the screwdriver type autofocus. You can see it turning there. And this is a zoom ring. It is not a push-pull. Now this lens is a constant aperture of f4, unlike the cheaper 70-200 and 70-300 lenses. It does autofocus a bit slowly though, and it's a little bit loud. Now, as you can see here, it does have a rotating front element, so it might not be the best for graduated filters or polarizing filters, but it will work if you're paying attention. Now, this lens is insanely expensive for what it is. A couple years ago, Ken Rockwell did a review on his copy of the 70-200 f4 AF, and he gave it a fantastic review, and people kind of went crazy for it. Since then, most of the decent used ones have been snapped up, and the ones that are remaining, well, the price just became ridiculous. Since it was only made for about 2 years, there were not very many that were made, and since it's an older lens, a lot of them have been broken or thrown away. Now, the performance of this lens is similar optically to the 70-300 f4.5 5.6 VR, but it does have better bokeh because it has the f4 aperture instead of f5.6. The autofocus is slow, but it's decent on any semi-pro or professional level DSLR. It's okay on the f100, the f90, or the n90 depending on where you live, and the f4, f5, and f6. The f4 is a little slow, but it's okay. The aperture really is constant. It's around t5.2 for you film people, but it's still about one stop through the range less than the 2.8s, so it's okay, but it's definitely not as bad as the normal consumer ones. There's a decent amount of vignetting on full frame and film, but there's absolutely none on DX as far as I can tell. If there is, it's maybe a half a stop. It's not very much. It's very, very sharp from f5.6 to f11, but it's very good f4. So I'd say that it's acceptable for portrait work, but maybe not product photography or anything requiring extreme edge-to-edge sharpness. Now, it's not the best lens for weddings, even though that's one of the main things I use it for, because it's kind of loud when it autofocuses. Also, because it's kind of slow when autofocuses, if somebody moves, you might have a bit of hunting. Now, this is not a big deal if you're at the long end, at least for the noise, since you'll likely be at least 20 feet or about 6 meters away. The 70-200 AFS, 80-200 AFS, the version 1 VR, version 2 VR, all of those are better for autofocus because they are faster. The 70-300 AFS is also quite a bit faster, as are the 55-200 and the 55-300, though they're all quite a bit slower. So, as far as high ISO performance, you're probably going to want one of these if you don't have a super crazy camera. I still shoot with a D200 because it has all the resolution I need, and this is fine for that. But if you have, say, a D100, you might want to get a 2.8 because it's not quite as good at high ISO. I would say that the best spot for this lens is between about 80 to 85 and 135. Those are the best spots for portraits. The bokeh is really good. Closer to 210, it's not as good, and at 70, there's not a lot of separation because it is f4. I would say that if you're pretty close at 85 to 100, you're going to get really good bokeh. I would say that it's decently comparable to the Canon 70-200 f4. The Canon version is a little bit sharper, but not by a lot. Plus, this does not have VR, so it might not be the best for weddings if you're starting out and looking at going all f4. If you really, really want to stick with Nikon and only go f4, you might want to consider getting the 70-300 and only using it up to about 180 to 230 millimeters, because after that it gets pretty dark. For my recommendations, I would say for sports, indoor, absolutely not, unless it's something that you can pre-focus on. If you can pre-focus, this is a great lens because it is fast, but the focus speed is slow, so it's not great for basketball, it's not fantastic for football. It will track, but only with a professional level. So if you have a D1, a D2, say a D2H or a D2X, D3, or a D4, yeah, it'll be great, but anything else, maybe not. The D700 and D800 should do okay with it too. Now the 70-300, it does give you more range, but it's slower and heavier, and VR does not help for sports. So if you can get by with the slower focusing and less range, the 70-210 is a great lens for sports, especially outside. Now it's a very lightweight lens for a telephoto, which means that it's great with the crop bodies, any of the crop bodies, except maybe the professional level crop bodies like the D2 and the D21, or the D2 and the D1. But it feels a little bit light on them. I used to shoot with a D1X, and this was a bit light. Now it's great on the compact full-frame bodies and the compact DX bodies, like the pro ones, like the D300, the D200, D700, D800. But like I said, it's a little bit light for the single-digit ones. Now, I use it mainly for portraits. I think it's fantastic for them. I highly recommend it. I actually use it in my business, and people, they go crazy over the portraits that this thing takes. Weddings is a maybe. It depends on where you tend to shoot. If you can use flash, it's okay. If you can't use flash, I recommend either trying to get venues with good lighting, or using some additional lighting, or be prepared to use a tripod, unless you're willing to shoot at ISO 3200 or more. My last wedding, I shot this at 1600, but it was a really well-lit wedding. The slow aperture does come into play when they're walking down the aisle or at receptions, but again, tripods help, and so does additional lighting. VR, the lack of VR can be a problem, since weddings, you're typically okay to shoot down to 1/60th of a second, but since this camera doesn't have it, you kind of need to bump up your ISO. Not a big deal if you have a professional body lit or a professional camera, but you should still think about it. And as I said earlier, the AF is a little bit loud, so it's not great for the most sensitive ceremonies. Typically a ceremony where they'll let you use flash, it's going to be more relaxed, so this will probably be okay for you. I would not say that it's for fast-paced sports like basketball and football, as I said earlier, without a semi-pro or professional body, because the autofocus will be slow. I had a really old camera, I think it was a N202 or it was an F202, something really old, and the autofocus was just dreadful. I also have an N70, and the autofocus is really, really slow on it with this lens. It's not great for wildlife photographers because it's not quiet, otherwise it's great, and it is not at all for bodies with a built-in focus motor, or without the built-in focus motor, like the D40, D60, D3000, 3100, 3200, and the 5000 ones. It's not great for those. Unless you're just going to do video, then it's a great solution. So, do I recommend this lens? Yes, I do. But I do not recommend that you pay any more than about $175 for it at most. I paid about $140 for this lens from KEH. I'll put a link in the description below. They're a great place to get them. I've bought tons of lenses from them. They have a great return policy too. But if you are looking at one and they want any more than $200, I would not buy it, because you're gonna find something cheaper. And if not, you can always go for a 70-300, a used 80-200. Some of the old 80-200 autofocus ones are down to $350 now. So if you can't justify the full $2,400 for the 70-200 AMS2, I would say that this is a good option if you're budget limited. If you're doing video, this is great, partially because the zooming action is really smooth, and the focus, while it is a really small focus ring, it has quite a bit of, as you can see here, it has quite a bit of range to the focus, so you can do some pretty decent focus pulls. So anyway, that's my review. I'll put up some photos that I've taken with this lens right after the video ends. If you want to check out any of the work that I've done with this lens, check out my website, jnphoto.biz, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.